All right, in our last lesson, we looked at how you find the length of a line segment, and we reviewed how you find the slope of a line segment. In this lesson, we're going to look at how you find the midpoint of a line segment. So by the end of today, you should be able to find the midpoint of a line segment first, being able to, if you're given a graph of the line segment, but more importantly, using the midpoint formula. So we're going to look at that formula and where it comes from. So just a reminder here that lines, this is our line y equals negative 3x plus 4, have an infinite length. So if something is infinitely long, it doesn't make a sense to talk about the midpoint of it, because the point that is halfway between something that goes to infinity and infinity doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Any point that you pick has an infinite length of line on either side of that point. Line segments, on the other hand, which have a definite beginning and end, so this is the line segment from 0, 4 to 2, negative 2, they have a midpoint that is halfway between the two endpoints. So for this line here, our midpoint here is at 1, 1. Okay, why is this our midpoint? Because the distance from 0, 4 to that midpoint and the distance from that midpoint to the point 2, negative 2, the other endpoint, are exactly the same. So it divides that line in half. So we want to be able to determine the midpoint of these line segments. So if you're given a graph, you can often just look at the graph and figure out, okay, where's that midpoint going to be? And our midpoint for this first line here is going to be right here. It's going to be the point 2, negative 5. Okay? And we can see that, like we can see, if we go down 2 and over 1, and then if we go down 2 and over 1, that those two distances from here to here and here to here are going to be exactly the same. Okay? So the other way of looking at it is that the x-coordinate of our midpoint here is halfway in between the x-coordinates of our endpoints. So the x value of the midpoint is halfway in between, or it's the average of the x values of the endpoints. So in other words, if we take the 7, which is our one, sorry, not 7, but we want to work with the x's here. So we want the 3, which is the end value of our one endpoint, and the 1, which is the end value of our other. So if we do 3 plus 1, and we average them, divide them by 2, we get the x value for our midpoint. And the same is true if we want to look at the y values. Our y values here are 7 and 3. The y value is the average of the y values of the endpoints. So if we've got endpoints of 7 and 3, if we do 7 plus 3 divided by 2, we take that average, we get 10 divided by 2, we get 5. So putting these two things together, this gives us our y, this gives us our x. We put them together and we get our midpoint 2, negative 5. So we could say m midpoint 2, negative 5. Okay? And this here, these formulas that we've developed here for the x and the y, are how we get, or where the midpoint formula that appears on your formula sheet comes from. If you look at your formula sheet, what you see is something that looks like this. MP equals x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. what this formula is telling you is how to get the y value and the x value, okay, for that midpoint. And it's expressing this as an ordered pair. So it's probably easier to work with these kind of split up a little bit. That if we want to use our midpoint formula, we're going to pull out the x part of it. So the x of our midpoint is going to be x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And the y for our midpoint is going to be y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And then we can work out what the x and the y are and then state the coordinate at the end. So let's use this formula for this line that we have over here on the right. The line segment, sorry, not a line, but a line segment from 1, 2 to 5, 8. We're going to do like we've done when we were working with the length formula. We are going to label one of our points x1, y1, and another one x2 and y2. And then we're just going to sub those numbers into the formula that we have here. So our x for our midpoint is going to be 1 plus 5 divided by 2. And let's just work out what that is. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Then for our y value, y1 is 2. y2 is 8. So 2 plus 8 divided by 2. So our y value is going to be 10 divided by 2, or 5. So just putting those two numbers together, the midpoint is 3, 5. And if we don't believe the formula, in this case, we can confirm it just by looking at our graph here. And we can see that this point right here is our midpoint, and that point is at 3, 5. So we'll do a couple of examples here. We'll do one where we're just applying the midpoint formula, and then we'll do a second one where we are given some information about the midpoint, and we want to go backwards, and we want to figure out what one of the endpoints is. All right, our first one here is a little bit more straightforward. Determine the midpoint of the line segment between -5, 7 and 2, -12. All right, I'm going to start with the two parts of my midpoint formula. y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And then in the question, I'm going to label one of my points x1, y1, another one x2, y2. Each point always has to be xy and then xy. And then I'm just going to sub in this given information. So x1 is -5, x2 is 2, and I want to divide that by 2. So x is going to be -3 divided by 2, or -1.5. Is it okay that this is a decimal? Absolutely. Okay. Do the same thing for our y's here. y1 is 7, y2 is -12. I'm going to put the -12 in brackets just to help me when I'm doing that addition there. So 12 plus -12 is like, sorry, 7 plus -12 is 7 minus 12. That's going to be -5 over 2, which is going to be -2.5. So our midpoint is going to be -1.5, -2.5. Done. All right, let's look at the second one here. The midpoint of the line segment AB is given by point M, 1, 2. And point B is 6, 7. Find the coordinates of point A. All right, we're going to start from the midpoint formula. We know we want, let's do this in let's put a line down the middle here to separate these two questions, and we'll work maybe in a different color here. So our midpoint formula is x equals x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and the y part is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So the x and the y here and here are the x and the y for the midpoint, MP. Let's we actually call this, let's write out midpoint here. Midpoint. Midpoint. Okay. So when I go to the question, this is my midpoint right here. So this is what I want to put in for x and y. X is equal to 1. So let's put in, let's just work on the x part for a little bit. So x is going to be equal to 1 from there. Now, I can label my points, my endpoints, like x1, y1, x2, y2 again. So let's label point B here. It's my endpoint. Let's label it x2, y2. Okay. I can sub those numbers into the equation as well. So my x2 value is going to be 6. It's divided by 2. x1 represents the x value of point A. That's what I'm trying to find. So I'm just going to leave that as an unknown, x1. And now I've got a little equation here that I can solve for x1. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. And then I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. 2 minus 6 is negative 4. So x1 is negative 4. So the x-coordinate of point A is negative 4. I can do the same thing with the y portion here. So I know that my midpoint, my y value is 2. I know that y2 is 7. I don't know what y1 is. Y1 is the y value for coordinate A. That's what I'm trying to find. But again, I have a little equation here that I can solve for y1. So I'm going to cross multiply here to get 4 equals y1 plus 7. And then I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Y1 is negative 3. So point A here is x1, y1. So A is the point negative 4, negative 3.